Welcome to the book of First Peter. Now, are you sure you guys are ready for this one? First Peter is all about suffering in the Christian life. It is pretty intense. And Peter wrote this intense epistle from Rome shortly before he was martyred. And the thing is, he doesn't say he wrote it from Rome. What does he say? Let's check it out. Go to the last chapter of this epistle. He says, a second to last verse, she who is at Babylon sends you greetings. Now, why do you think Peter used the symbolic name for Rome, Babylon? And why do you think that he said that he's writing to the elect exiles of the dispersion? Now, he's using all three of these terms symbolically, isn't he? As one who is being persecuted, writing to those who are themselves being persecuted, he is keenly aware that this world is not our home. We have been dispersed. We've been exiled out of the promised land, living in Babylon, the heart of human evil. And usually this term, the dispersion, it applies to Jews living outside of the promised land. But Peter, he's going to apply it to Gentiles living outside of or waiting for the fully consummated kingdom of Christ, the Messiah. And these Gentiles, these exiles, are dispersed in Asia. Let me show you specifically where. A little map here. Love myself a little map. Paul is writing to the elect exiles in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. And so he's writing to a wide area, not a single specific church here. And it seems like the persecution in these areas are increasing. It's on the rise. Check out this little chart I threw together, cataloging the suffering and persecution in the book of First Peter. Now, Peter is going to label this persecution as a trial. Down here in 4:1, a fiery trial. We've been grieved by various trials, and it's possible that these trials are physical in nature. This persecution, this suffering. It does say that they have suffered in the flesh, so maybe they're being beaten or potentially even martyred. But at this, there is certainly real fear present. Do not fear anything that is frightening. Have no fear of them. Cast all your anxieties on him. But it seems like at this early stage of persecution, they are targeted for discrimination. Christians are targeted for discrimination. They are speaking against Christians. They revile them. They slander you. They malign you and insult you for the name of Christ. And this discrimination is coming at them from all sides, from government, from masters, slave and master relationships, and also within their own family as well. It's really not a safe or a comfortable time to be a Christian. Well, Peter's going to write this letter then to encourage these Christians to endure suffering. But he's going to do so much more than that. He's going to give them tools so that they can do just that. He's going to give them a fresh perspective so that they can see their suffering the way that God sees it. And he's going to, give them a peek behind the curtain to see just what God is doing, how God is working good through their suffering. Now, Peter's going to structure his message in 4 parts. There are big 4 parts here. And in the first part, it's really, really quite beautiful. Peter is going to lift up their gaze, lift up their face, because they're stuck looking down at their suffering, right, at their situation. Peter's going to lift their gaze and get them to see their present identity in a new family of God and their future hope in the kingdom. That's part 1. Part 2, he's going to get practical. And he's going to say that when you face discrimination from all these different groups, do not resist, do not fight back, but rather do good. That's the Christian calling. And then in the third section, he's going to both elaborate on the good things that God is working through the suffering in your life, and then he's also going to give them some counsel on how they can be ready to face that persecution and that trial when it comes. And then finally, in this fourth section, Peter is going to set their suffering in the context of the church at large, and then have a specific word to the leaders of churches as well. With the remaining time in this opening lecture, we are going to take a look at this first section in more detail, these exiles' identity and their hope. So remember, Peter starts this section by gently lifting up their gaze. And look how he does this. He says, for you have been born again to a living hope, to an inheritance which is imperishable, undefiled, unfading, kept in heaven for you, and you yourselves are being guarded by the power of God. Now, why do you think that Peter emphasizes this imperishable nature of their inheritance? Well, he wants them to see that there is nothing in the world, all the suffering and persecution they can throw at them, there is nothing in the world that can take eternity from them. You remember what Jesus said? He said, do not fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. All of the things that they are experiencing now and possibly the increase in persecution in the future, it is powerless to touch their eternal inheritance, which is reigning with Christ over the new creation forever and ever. Amen. That is awesome. And once Peter firmly establishes this eternal heavenly perspective in their minds, only then does he transition in verse 6 to really what is the heart of the letter. Let's take a look at that in the text. Verse 6, he's going to get into it. I don't think we need this anymore. Close you. Neither do we need you. We are just going to look at Bible. Let's go to chapter 1. So he lays out their imperishable inheritance, and then he says, in this you rejoice. Praise God for this inheritance, even though if for a little while you have been grieved by various trials. And even after he mentions these trials that they're experiencing, he's going to jump right back to their eternal reward. And he's going to do so by redefining their trials. He's going to call them tests. These trials are tests which test the genuineness of your faith, which will result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, what do you think this refers to? The revelation of Jesus Christ. It's his second coming. And this hope of the second coming, the return of our Messiah, it is just all over 1 Peter. He's going to reference it and point to it again and again and again. Let me show you. I have it in this dark pink color. The revelation of Jesus Christ. It will be revealed in the last time. Grace will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Down in 2:12, I think it is. The Gentiles, they will glorify God on the day of visitation. That is when God visits his people. And let's jump down to chapter 4. 4:13. You will rejoice and be glad when Jesus' glory is revealed. There's that word, apocalypsis, revealed. Then in chapter 5, a couple more. Peter himself is a partaker in the glory that will be revealed when Jesus is revealed. And who is Jesus but the chief shepherd? And when he appears, the elders whom Peter is commissioning, they will receive an unfading crown of glory. What is Peter saying? He's saying, look, lift up your face and look to the second coming of Jesus. And this call to look up, this exhortation to look up, is the first in a series of exhortations here in this second section, 1:13 to 2:3. There's just, I believe there's 5 or 6 different exhortations, calls, commands, and these are very unique exhortations. Peter is going to use them as a vehicle to reinforce their identity in the family of God, in the historic family of God. Now, you remember, Peter is writing this letter to Gentiles, and we're going to make that point plain here in this section, but he insists here that these Gentiles have been transferred from their lives of paganism into God's family, a family which formerly was exclusively a Jewish identity, but now it is a multi-ethnic family of God. And he's going to do this by emphasizing family language here in this section and by utilizing Jewish exhortations. Let me show you how this works. It's pretty cool. Okay, so we need to jump back to chapter 1. And starting here in verse 13, our series of exhortations. Now, formerly, they were ignorant, right? In their lives of paganism, but now they've become children. They've entered into a new family, as it were. And as members of a new family, this family operates by a new set of rules. You are to be holy as I am holy. And of course, this is the fundamental calling of Israel, isn't it? From the book of Leviticus. All right, let's see this pattern one more time. You inherited nothing but futility from your forefathers, Gentiles who served pagan gods, but now you call the God of Israel your father, and and now you fear him throughout the time of your exile, just like Israel was supposed to fear God while they were in Babylon. I mean, you think about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Great examples of that. Let's see this pattern one more time. You have been born again, born into a family, a new family. And as a baby, as a newborn infant, you are to long for pure spiritual milk. So that you can taste and see that the Lord is good. And of course, that line is just taken right from one of Israel's favorite hymns, pulled right out of their hymn book, Psalm 34, a favorite of Peter's, and we'll see more of that in a minute. So, unfortunately, Peter, however, has some hard words for Israel in this next section, 2:4 to 10. Now, Jesus, he is the cornerstone, right? That Peter's going to make that point, and this entire section is going to be based off of that fact. Jesus is the cornerstone of the new and true temple. Now, Israel, and certainly their leadership, the builders of that temple, they rejected their Messiah. To those Jewish leaders, Jesus was a stone of stumbling. He was a rock of offense. But those Jews who did believe in their Messiah, and these Gentiles to whom the gospel was preached, they came to him, came to their Messiah. They believed in him, and as a result, they became living stones who were built together into a spiritual house, into the very temple of God. Now, in this post-Pentecost age, the church houses the very presence of God. But more than being simply the temple, that's not simple at all. They're also the priests of that temple. Let me show you that. This is such a critical verse here in 1 Peter chapter 2. So they have become themselves living stones built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, unlike Israel. You see, Israel, they stumbled because they didn't obey the word. But you, on the other hand, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possessions. You see, once you were not a people, right? Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Now, this doesn't mean, I want to clarify, I want to be very clear, this doesn't mean that the church has now replaced Israel, or that the church is the new Israel, the fulfillment of Israel. I don't believe that personally for a second. I think that the gifts and the callings of God are irrevocable, and that God will restore his elect nation when he restores his kingdom at his second coming. But I will hold that the role of Israel as being and representing God to the nations, that role has been given to the church today. Now, what does any of this have to do with persecution? I mean, we kind of made sense of it here in this first section, but what does this have to do with the suffering and persecution these exiles are experiencing? Well, Peter wants to place their suffering in a new story with a new purpose. As members of the family of God and as vessels of the very presence of God and as intermediaries between the nations and that holy God, these suffering Christians have a unique opportunity to bear witness, to speak about the sufferings of their Messiah when they themselves are suffering. And we're going to see how Peter further develops this calling as we work through the rest of 1 Peter next.